Have you ever wondered how a group once sworn to defend their people became the very monsters they fought against? Join us on a journey through history as we uncover the enigmatic tale of the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers. In a time when fear and brutality held sway, a group known as the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers emerged as a big force, capturing women and subjecting them to unimaginable torture. The Cheyenne people started their story by moving from their old home in Minnesota to the Wild West in the 18th century. They wanted a new life on the big open plains. During this time, a wise and spiritual person named Sweet Medicine became important to them. Sweet Medicine helped the Cheyenne change their society a lot. They made different groups for different purposes, especially for defense. One of these groups was the Dog Soldiers, who became really strong. The Dog Soldiers were founded by a warrior who wasn't particularly successful at first. He started his own warrior group, and his fellow tribe members were skeptical. But then, after a night of singing sacred songs, he led a pack of dogs away from the camp, and miraculously, these dogs transformed into fierce warriors. This astonishing event was reported to the Cheyenne, who informed the prophet Sweet Medicine about it. Sweet Medicine claimed that he already knew about it, and thus, the Dog Soldier Society came into existence. The Dog Soldiers were a powerful group known for their combat skills and unique practices. They painted themselves and their horses with symbols that struck fear into enemies' hearts, earning a fearsome reputation. Adorning distinctive dog robes or sashes, they symbolized their unwavering commitment to fight to the death. Their feathered war bonnets with raven or crow feathers pointing in different directions showcased their status as great warriors. But beneath this reputation lies a dark truth. A look into their history reveals the horrifying treatment of captive women. These women endured unimaginable suffering, stripped of their freedom and dignity, subjected to physical and emotional torture. Their stories shed light on the devastating impact of conflict on those caught in its midst. This raises important questions. How could a group committed to defending their people engage in such cruelty? What caused this transformation from protectors to tormentors? In the past, there were some very difficult times when conflicts brought forth terrible sufferings, especially for captive women. These women were taken away from their families and communities, and what they went through was beyond imagination. The Dog Soldiers, a group during a tough civil war in 1864, were also responsible for causing pain and suffering. In those days, there were terrible incidents known as raids and massacres. These events happened when the Civil War was at its worst in 1864. The Dog Soldiers saw that America was weak and took this chance to attack vulnerable settlements. These attacks went on from a place called Washington County in Kansas to Nebraska, where they carried out one of their biggest and most planned attacks. One of these attacks was called the Massacre Along the Medicine Road. This attack reached all the way to Denver, and it caused a lot of damage along the trade route where people traveled. The reports from this time tell us about extremely violent acts. Women were treated very badly, and many people were killed in brutal ways. There was a horrifying practice known as scalping that became too common during these attacks. What's really striking is that these events showed a very different side from what people thought about Cheyenne women. Before this, people had a certain idea that Cheyenne women were pure and chaste, but these attacks revealed something much darker. Even fur traders who once thought Cheyenne women were not to be approached saw the terrible sexual violence that was inflicted on women from enemy groups. One terrible day that still chills us happened on August 10, 1868. More than 180 Southern Cheyenne warriors, including members of a warrior society called the Dog Soldiers, gathered in a place called Saline Valley. They initially wanted to attack the Pawnee tribe, who were their enemies, but fate took a different turn. A small group of warriors ended up going to a farm owned by a man named David Bacon in Lincoln County. These warriors were looking for food, so they went into David Bacon's house. What they did next, however, was beyond horrifying. They attacked Dame Bacon, David Bacon's wife, and put her through a horrible and traumatic experience. It seems that they were influenced by alcohol they had taken unlawfully. After this, the warriors continued their rampage. They caused terror in places like Solomon River, Mitchell County, Cloud County, and Ottawa County. They didn't show any mercy. They killed many white settlers, took children as captives only to later leave them behind, and subjugated more women to awful sexual abuse. These attacks were some of the worst conflicts between settlers and Cheyennes in Kansas from 1867 to 1869. This time was already tense because of the Colorado Gold Rush, the Sand Creek Massacre in 1854, and the acts of revenge that followed. In September 1874, there was a very sad event where a German family experienced a terrible tragedy caused by a group called the Dog Soldiers. There was a man named John German and his family. They were traveling near the Smoky Hill River on their way to a place called Fort Wallace. Unexpectedly, Chief Medicine Water and his group of dog soldiers attacked them. John, his wife Lydia, their son Stephen, and their daughters Rebecca, Jane, and Joanna were brutally killed and even had parts of their skin removed from their heads. The attackers also took their belongings and set their camp on fire. The dog soldiers took the 4 youngest daughters, Catherine, 17 years old, Sophia, 12 years old, Julia, 7 years old, and Nancy Addie, 5 years old, as captives. Life for the captured girls was very hard. They didn't have enough food to eat, were sometimes treated badly, and even suffered from violence from the young members of the dog soldiers group. Later on, Julia and Addie were given to another group, while Catherine and Sophia were released in March 1875 when Chief Stone Calf and his Southern Cheyenne group surrendered at Fort Leavenworth. This terrible experience that the German sisters went through was just one example of the cruel actions of the dog soldiers. There was another woman named Sarah White who was taken captive in August 1868 from her father's farm in Kansas and was held captive for about 7 months. She had a hard time speaking because of the trauma that she faced. However, she met another woman named Anna Morgan while in captivity, and they became friends. They supported each other and were allowed to talk when they sat around the campfire. During a battle called the Battle of Washita on November 27, 1868, Sarah and Anna were in a village led by Chief Whirlwind. This village was downstream from another village led by Chief Black Kettle. Sarah heard the sounds of the battle, but the dog soldiers moved her to a different place because she had frostbite due to the cold weather. Luckily, on March 22, 1869, Sarah and Anna were freed from captivity near Sweetwater Creek, Texas. They were handed over to some soldiers from the 7th U.S. Cavalry and 19th Kansas Volunteer Cavalry led by Lieutenant Colonel Custer. All these specific incidents show how terribly the dog soldiers treated captive women. The dog soldiers were known for not only their violence, but also their unique rituals and ways of fighting in war. They did rituals that were very gruesome. These rituals were based on old traditions and were meant to make them seem powerful and scary. They believed that if they hurt themselves, they would become stronger warriors. These rituals involved hurting and torturing themselves, and they left a strong impression on anyone who saw them because of their savage nature. Apart from their rituals, the dog soldiers were also known for how they fought in wars. They were really good at guerrilla warfare, which means they used surprise and sneaking around to win battles. They knew the land very well and could blend into their surroundings, making it hard for their enemies to find them. As time passed, the dog soldiers faced many problems that led to their downfall. One big problem was that more and more white settlers were moving west, and this caused fights with the U.S. government. The new settlements and forts disrupted the Native American way of life, including the Cheyenne people. The dog soldiers were some of the few who fought against this, but they were up against a much stronger army. The awful Sand Creek Massacre made them even more determined to protect their land, culture, and way of life. Apart from the massacre, the dog soldiers also faced other fights that made things even worse for them. These wars, along with the government policies and other military actions, made them weaker and weaker over time. And there was another big problem, a disease called cholera. This disease spread through the Native American communities and killed many of them, almost half of the population. This made life very hard for the dog soldiers and other Cheyenne warrior groups. Even though the dog soldiers from the 1800s aren't around anymore, parts of their legacy still exist today. The Northern and Southern Cheyenne tribes still have military groups, and there's even a modern version of the dog soldiers. These groups are not as violent as before, but they still carry some of the traditions and bravery of the original dog soldiers. Well guys, That's it for today's video. Thanks a lot for watching, and meet you again in the next one. Until then, take care and bye for now.